Welcome back to the podcast. This is A.R. Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am A.R. Bala, and I am joined today by Tara A. Lake, author of the Age of the Almek series. Phenomenal book so far. I've gotten a little bit into it. We'll cover that in a minute. But how you doing, Tara?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm excited, especially after reading a little bit of the dystopian book that you have so far. Oh my God, it's so gripping. But
Oh, awesome.
where can people find you? Where is social media plugs, website, if you have a company, anything?
Yep, I'm at Tara A. Lake on Instagram, and www.taraalake.com is my website. Age of the Almec is on Amazon right now. So
Definitely, it is out on Amazon. Go and get it. Pick it up right now, wherever, however you can. Pick up your phone. Call your cat. Whatever you got to do. It is. I'm telling you, it really is worth it, and it's honestly one of the most well-reviewed indie author books that I've seen so far. It had really high reviews, so like kudos for that. It's really awesome.
Thank you.
Not knocking any other previous authors, awesome
Yeah.
towns, but just
Yeah.
review numbers. It's unreal. So kudos for that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What is could you give a little introduction to what the Age of Almec is, the society that you have built?
Yeah, so it's basically about a civilization surviving following a global water crisis. So the water crisis kind of happens before the book takes place, and we see these two colonies that develop, and we kind of basically just follow their lives, the bizarre, the kind of barbaric things that happen. They fall into a master ruling, and I play around with kind of corrupt rulers and social issues and environmental issues. So it touches on a lot of different things, and it's really kind of just an adventure. It's multiple characters, and yeah, it's just a fun kind of. I guess there are instances of shocking content, so it's meant for adults. Yeah, I don't know what else I can say about it.
No, oh my God, no. I'm sitting back because it's unreal. Just I don't know every little aspect of it, and like the little nuances in between. How like one of the I loved how it started as a prologue and then went into the rules. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a lore nerd. Almost it almost doesn't even matter what type of lore it is. If you really pull me into something, I'm
Yeah.
sold. And I got that immediately. And the prologue
Oh, cool.
has the map right at the top too, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, just everything about the book and the cover. I love iconography, and like the cover has like that cool little, I don't even, looks like a rune type of thing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the cover I played around with and designed that symbol.
You made the
And then
cover?
I didn't make the cover. I designed the symbol, and I knew I wanted it to be something that was important to the Almec. And my friend illustrated the cover for me, so it was kind of a we worked together on it kind of thing. And then I knew I wanted a map. That was just I thought that'd be such a cool visualization to kind of add to the whole world. And then the prologue, that was something I played around with so much. I was constantly back and forth with my developmental editor on it, just trying to get it right. And we decided the best way to do that was to sort of show a tiny little bit of how they got there, the
Yeah.
Porcupine Mountains, and then, prove why this civilization, why these civilized people coming from, modern day life would accept a master rule, and then all the kind of barbaric things to follow in the next 18 years. So
No, I mean, oh my. Again, I'm just thinking back to the little nuances. One of the rules being that on the seventh day the masters can rest.
yes.
Oh God, I mean, again, little things like that you just I lose my mind over it. How did you get the idea of it, the genesis of it? And you know what? Before even the book, how did you get writing started with writing in general?
um Well, I'll take you back to when I was in high school. I was in a creative writing course. I was 17, and my father was sick with cancer, and he ended up passing away during that time. And I'd never really been into writing before or known that it was something that I enjoyed, but I leaned into this creative writing class, and I had to write a series of short stories, and they were very dark, and it was very, therapeutic. writing these stories. And I didn't notice at the time that it was, my way of coping. It helped me get through it all. I just remember thinking my poor teacher is probably wondering about this 17-year-old girl and these terrible dark short stories that she's writing. And then after that, I kind of let it go a little bit. And then into my early 20s, I got back into writing. I started writing a young adult, almost sort of fantasy, which was very strange because it wasn't something I'd ever read. And I dropped that off, barely dabbled in it, and then had kids, marriage, and intense renovation. And I kind of stopped writing for a few years and then got back into it into my late 20s and early 30s. So the last 5 years, I've been a lot more into it. And 3 years ago, I started writing Age of the Almek and decided to finally take my writing seriously and just go all in. So,
My God, what an inspirational story. Like that's I think one of the most beautiful thing about like creatives in any sense is that they can kind of take the trauma and make it into kind of they take it like really like manure and turn it into like a nice flower. It's one of like the
absolutely.
nicest, yeah, it's one of like the most awesome things about like creatives and artists and things like that. But as far as
Yeah.
the inspiration, how did you get started with Age of Almec? How did that inspiration come, and how did you get the idea, and where'd that come
Yeah.
from?
It's a good question. I've always loved dystopian works. I love the Hunger Games, the
Yes,
Divergent series,
definitely.
the
Oh my God.
Handmaid's Tale, all that jazz.
Yeah.
And I like playing around with, just kind of plausible things that could happen if we don't change our ways. I
Mm.
like those kind of darker messages that dystopians offer. So I just remember sitting thinking one day, like, I want to write this novel and it has to be something impactful, but fun and an adventure, a whole world for a reader to enter. And I just kind of thought of a water crisis because I'm not an expert at all at what's going on kind of globally with our water situation right now, but I've read little bits and articles here and there, and I know there's terrible things happening with our water, and a lot of it is our fault.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of took that idea and ran with it and thought, this is something that could be super scary, but also eye-opening to write about. So that's how I got into writing about a water crisis. Um, and then as far as, it being in the Porcupine Mountains, I knew I wanted it to be somewhere realistic because that's kind of a dystopian book, right? It has to be realistic,
Mm.
even if it's based in the future. So I just kind of stumbled across the Porcupine Mountains in my research online when I was trying to find a setting. And I thought this place would be a perfect place to kind of settle a civilization. And sure, I can say there's a hidden underground uncontaminated spring down there that they could tap into. Yeah.
Oh God. And then how did everything else kind of like develop into it? How did the characters come? It's always a question I love asking. Like how did your characters develop? Is it something that they came from the plot, or is it something that it seemed like they populated the world the moment you made it?
Um, some of them came right off the hop, and
Mm.
then some of them just kind of came through revisions. When I first started writing the first draft, there was only one character. It was a single POV, and it was Vera. And I actually got stuck about halfway through the book, and I was like, there's more to discover here. So then actually in the second half of the book, I started writing in multiple POVs in the first draft. And I was, in chats with my developmental editor, and she's like, well, that's quite unconventional, but it's not something you can't do. So then I was like, but I don't think I like that. So then I went into the second draft and discovered just a lot more character perspectives. Um, for me, when I'm thinking about a character, I more go off of impressions or feelings when I'm developing a character. I don't um I've never done like a character interview. My characters don't talk to me. I'm maybe a little bit unconventional, but I just go off of a feeling. And then I try to portray that feeling in every scene with that character. And I think, okay, if I'm feeling this from this character and the other characters around them are feeling this thing, then the reader has to feel it too, right? Or you're
Mm.
hoping then the reader would then feel it. Um, and then I'll say too, I'm highly inspired by Game of Thrones, with the complex character stories that intertwine and then the politics. I love that. And even though Game of Thrones is fantasy and this is not, I definitely took that inspiration and pulled from that, all these characters with motivation over here for this guy's doing this over there. And then, you're wondering what their true intentions are. And yeah, I just kind of played around with that.
And well, again, I haven't gotten too deep into it, but the way it's plotted up right now with between Regan and I can't even remember the other guy's name because I just remembered him as the judge, which is a pretty cool title.
Yeah,
Uh,
Oberon.
Oberon, yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and how could I forgot that name? That was such a cool name. Now I think about it, I'm crazy. And man, I remember, I can't remember the third person's name. It was he was the curator. No,
Zev.
yes, the curator,
Yeah.
Zev, right?
Yes.
Yes. Again, like all the characters. One of my favorite things when you're getting really into like a, because one of the reviews I remember said it was like a page turner, and
Yeah.
immediately I was like, oh, let's find out about that, and I was like, oh my god, what? This is
Like,
unreal.
I'm gonna prove this wrong.
And I was like, oh my god, she's so right.
Aw, cool.
Yeah, no,
That's
and I was
awesome.
no, and I was tearing through it. Uh, I ripped through the prologue and the chapter one. And I remember I got stuck on the rules thing for a while. I remember I reread those like a couple thousand times because it was just like awesome. Just
Yeah.
like the idea of it, because what I liked so much about that rule thing is that like again, it's the whole lore. Those rules, right? Like if you probably were to count out the words of that, it's like what, 300 I'm assuming it's like a low word count,
Yeah.
those rules, right? But they
Yeah.
say so much of what the story is, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the way that the people conduct themselves, the verbiage, what was the insignificance, and
Yeah.
then
The favored.
yeah, the favored, and then the
Yeah.
Kala, and then
Yeah.
the what was the other
Segundo.
one? Yeah, Tagando, and
Yeah.
that's because that's where the masters came from. That was what they called their home.
Yeah.
Again, it was just like I'm a huge nerd for like lore, and like your book has rich lore, which
Oh,
is
cool.
yeah, it's actually it's almost like a case study, because like oftentimes like even just like in, I'm also an aspiring writer, and a lot of times like you have like such an idea for like lore and you just want to drop a person in the middle, but the idea, like the prologue was just exactly how you said it. It was the perfect kind of like bridge in between where we are now to like how they could be, and then you can get way, it's a lot more easy to drop you off when Vera's 18, and then like the book starts off from there. And then God, I don't want to spoil too many things, but like I love the little nuances. That's I think that's why it's such a page turn. It feels like every page you're hearing some outrageous things, like, oh, what's next? Like the
That's amazing to hear. I love that.
yeah, because like I remember as I was going in, I loved like the tension, because like how the chapter starts is that Vera is just talking, like she's talking about a situation she doesn't want to be in, but it literally starts off that she's the favored. So you're thinking like, all right, how can this be that bad if you're a favored? And you're in a council that's called the Circle. I can't remember the name of the group. What is it called again? Is it called the Circle?
The circle, yeah, where they meet for their ceremonies. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like the whole baby ritual thing that they do. I don't want to get into that, but my God, I mean, just it was blowing me away. I love all those little nuances. Where do you get the idea for those nuances?
Oh, that's so hard. I think just really those kinds of things came through revisions. I'll definitely say that, draft one was not anything like draft nine, which was the final draft of the book. Um, all these little layers and, depths were kind of added throughout. And then it was like, my developmental editor was amazing because she would say, like, I would write something and she would kind of say, oh, well, if you're going to say that, should that be a law? And then I'd have to decide, okay, how am I going to shift that? Or how am I going to make this more stern for the Almek? And am I going to make it a law? And if I am, what law is it going to be? So there was a lot of kind of fiddling with the laws and all those things. And then I had to decide, because I liked this idea of sort of, this unknown threat of someone having to be uprooted from their home colony.
Mm-hmm.
And So it was like, how am I going to play around with that? And how can I make this believable and plausible and prove why would they accept this? Why would they do this? So it was really just proving the why, essentially. And yeah, I think that was really just it. And then those things just kind of came sort of intuitively as I went.
My God. And then how did all the like what I mean by nuances is like even things like the names. Like how did you get the like Hendrix? How did you come up with the name
Yeah.
for Vera? How did you get Ida? How do you get I can't remember the infant's name. But
Lilith?
like
Lilith?
yes,
Yeah.
Lilith. Yeah. How did those come to be?
Um,
Did you get them from your own life or did you just make them up?
I mean, I would say there was a little bit of considering the fact that this is in the future. So
Mm.
some of the names are a little bit unique. There was also a little bit of just like, like Google online. Um, Most of the time, though, to be honest, I'm super intuitive when I write. So if I add a new character in and I can't think of the name, I'll literally just put a like, do the underscore, like a blank space to fill in the blank, and then I'll
Yeah.
highlight it. And every time it's so and so says, I'll under like blank and highlight it, and then I'll come back to it when I have a feeling of the name. So it's a very intuitive process of just finding that right one. And yeah, I make the names up too. I just yeah.
I gotta say I do the same thing. I'll put blah 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 and then I'll like highlight it and make it red and bold it.
Yeah,
We'll come back to that in a minute.
yeah, exactly. I'll revisit you.
Yeah, especially because one of the things that we were said for a moment that I'm actually really excited to talk about too is while you said that you're writing book two, which is gonna be awesome, but you said that you wanted to kind of talk about like the trials and tribulations you've had with that. That's one of my favorite things about talking about like kind of the behind the scenes of what writing is. And to
Yeah.
me, names are, believe it or not, 40% of my hang up time. Cause like I'll put that blah 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 and like underline and whatnot, but then I'll get a little bit further and that'll fester in my mind like, oh, come on, blah blah blah. You know,
Yeah.
and you go on Google and you're doing, you're looking up things that have no relevance. You're looking up like ancient, names for Thor, and you're like, oh, maybe it's because the character likes lightning. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All these like nonsensical things that when you should just be writing.
Yeah.
Like, what are your hangups?
Well, firstly, I would say the name of the book was one of the hangups. When I originally created the Almek, and I was in that first draft or two, the name the Almek was actually used to describe their way of life. It was used to describe their belief system. And as time went on, I was like, oh, I'm really procrastinating on titling this book, and I should really come up with a name. And then, I had a list of random things, none of them sat right. And then I came back to the Almec, and I was like, pulling off of sort of that primitive feel, because it's a futuristic society, but it's not a technologically advanced futuristic society. So I kind of came back to the Almec, and finally, after like probably 2 years or more into writing the book, decided that it would be called Age of the Almec. So the titling the book was a pretty big one. I'm trying to think of other hangups. I think because I'm very like I write I just kind of write chronologically and then to intuitively, so I don't plot very much. So sometimes a hang up will be just like finding ways to connect something I've written, like in chapter 13 to something I've written in chapter 2,
Hmm.
and just spending time on focusing on proving the why. What else is a hang up? Sometimes I get frustrated with research. This this book took a lot of scientific research, even though there's not a lot of sciencey stuff in it. There's a couple chapters where you get insight into the little sciencey bit with the water and stuff, but
Yeah, with Hendrix because he's a hydrolist.
yeah, and Vera too. And then there's a few other little sciencey instances throughout the book, but I needed to know, to understand what I was writing about, right? So the research, I mean, as much as it was cool, some of it felt almost like a little bit of a setback because I was like, I just want to write. I just want to go. I need to move forward. So for me, accepting that the research is moving forward, I think was a little bit of a setback for me.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah.
And it's funny too because sometimes research can do like the opposite where it's like, oh, I want to make, this sun purple, and you look up like the thing behind that and it's like, oh yeah, that's impossible in every shape, way, or form, and you're like, no, but what about
Yeah.
if this? And it's like, nah, no single way, and you're like, all right, whatever then. No
No way
purple
in
sun.
heck. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. It's actually something that like we talked about before, like the whole research and just regretting what you know. I
Yes.
think a pitfall that I see often with writers that like they'll just kind of like wing it, and you're like it'll like show in the writing. There was one time I was reading something, and it was actually very admittedly, it was like the person was an amazing writer when they were like 19, but they showed me something from them when they were like 13, and we were like case studying it like for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So he would like we were both talking about how the character that he made had no like he was like an archer, and the way that he would write is that like he hung the bow like this and just like doing outrageous things that like it made like absolutely no
Oh,
sense. And then like
yeah.
the or that the main character would be like this 110-pound person swinging like a battle axe that's like 600 pounds, and it's like, and he's like, oh no,
Yeah.
that just makes sense, that's how things happen and whatnot. And it would just never make it sense to like the weight of a horse like going down, little things like that like often or not, like, and it happens to me all the time. I remember the first time that I released like a couple short stories, the things that people would like feedback on were just like
Yeah.
so outrageous. Like I made like one little like scene that like a character was running late to work basically, and somebody's comment was like, wait, why would he wait in a line to use a teleporter when they could just use a bridge? And I'm just like, damn, why wouldn't they just use a bridge?
Shoot.
They got me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course which was awesome feedback, because then now I had to like replot the story to be like, oh, and the bridge was down. It actually became like a funny moment because like the character instead got to like complain that the city is not fixing the bridge like they should be, which is now why he has to wait in a line.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and little things like that is like awesome because you get to like turn it around, but like you never see it yourself, which is annoying. It's like why like an editor is so like crucial. Even like you can go back to your own thing over years and still not pick up on things like that.
It's so true. I actually had my developmental editor look at draft one. I had her look at my writing very early on, and her feedback was so critical for my understanding of how to write a novel. Like she would point out those silly little things and be like, well, that's just not realistic. That could never happen like that. And I'd be like, huh, okay, well, then I should apply that idea to this idea. And then it just becomes like knowing how to make the most simplest things realistic but sound good, right?
Yeah.
And so I would catch myself as I would write more drafts like, oh yeah, that's not right. This mammoth wouldn't be 10,000 pounds, he would be
Yeah.
1,500 pounds, right? Like stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think the more we write and the more we have our work critiqued, the more we'll catch those things.
Hmm.
But even still, we're so close to the work that you still need, other sets of eyes to highlight those like inconsistencies and details that just don't add up, right?
Yeah. And on top of that, I mean, like, as far as the industry goes, it's kind of hard as a reference. I mean, how many movies have you seen that there's like a giant stomping around and like, it misses like a person by like an inch and the person doesn't disintegrate, which is what would happen if a thing that big just stopped right next to you. I mean, it's in every movie we've ever
Exactly.
sini. How many times you've seen Mark Wahlberg go like, oh,
Yeah.
in between a giant and not die?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I guess that's what's awesome about the industry. Like George R. R. Martin wasn't the person that invented it, the idea of like of a character that's a narrator that can just die like that. But I
Mhm.
think he's a person. I think he's a person that a lot of people credit with like bringing him to the forefront. Up until Game of Thrones, I had never considered that.
Mhm.
And like it's awesome that like as we progress as an industry and people bring up new ideas, like you bring in rules like in between the chapters. That's insane to me. I've never seen that before. uh just like the way structures, like I don't know, everything's going to keep on growing, and like in 10 years everything will keep on going in different routes, especially with Amazon and everything
Mhm.
being electronic. It's unreal. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, what were you about to say?
Oh, I was going to say, I absolutely agree with you. I think that especially right now with just the way things are going for indie authors. I feel like it's just getting better and better. The communities are growing and it's becoming more of a professionally accepted work, right? To be an indie author.
Yes.
And so we're able to get our creative, wild ideas out there a lot easier and more accessible to others. So I totally agree with you. I think there'll be lots of cool things out there to come for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I've never been a brick and mortar published by a brick and mortar publishing company, but I would assume that how it used to be, there wasn't that much communication between authors. I would assume that they would have communication with their editor, but I don't think the authors were really talking too much in between each other, right? If anything,
Right.
maybe like helping one another out with like a review. I've seen like Stephanie
Mm-hmm.
Meyer's name pop up on like a whole bunch of other people's books. Like I know she reviewed Hunger Games pretty early,
Mm-hmm.
and Stephen King also reviewed Stephanie Meyer. So I think like the publishing housing might have done a thing like that. But I don't
Yeah.
think it's like how we have it now with Instagram, that we're calling each other up and like, bashing out ideas. Oh, I'll read this chapter for your chapter. Like the way
Yeah.
that we're growing is just gonna go getting insane. Like, what is the idea of a genre if you're just putting everything in there? You're
Mm-hmm.
doing sci-fi and dystopian. I'm sure you have friends that are doing romance, and as you read their stuff, you pick up on their hints of like what romance is, and now you get to put that in your book. And maybe you have a friend that's doing comedy, you get to sew that in too. It's just
For sure. We teach each other things and it's
yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. You gotta love the industry and
Yeah.
highlight yours. Your book is published by Lake Publishing, which I'm
With
assuming is your thing, right?
yeah, I well, originally when I was kind of, researching where I was going to self-publish, I was contemplating on publishing with Ingram Spark originally, and you needed a registered company to do that. And so I went through the process of registering Lake Publishing, and then I had my friend who designed my cover design a little logo. And I thought, even if I don't go with Ingram Spark, at least I'll have that little logo, and it's just another touch to add to the cover of my book. To add to that kind
Yes,
of
heck yeah.
professional sort of
Give it a little
quality, right?
catwalk.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah. So
how's the back look? Ah, beautiful. I mean, gorgeous.
yeah, thanks. But yeah, it's actually it's a multi-genre book, and that's another thing is I have a lot of weird interests.
Mm.
Like I love like cool fight scenes, and I love like
Kill Bill.
more. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Watch Kill Bill, and like I love like more deeper kind of thought-provoking scenes, and then I do like a little bit of romance. Like there is a very tiny subplot of romance in this book, but I'm not the kind of person that will just pick up a romance book to read it. I like a little bit of romance, but I need so much more than just that. So I was kind of trying to like put all of these things in this book that I like, but that I think, could attract a wide range of readers. So it's dystopian, it's post apocalyptic, it's soft sci fi. It's soft sci-fi because it's like, it touches on science and sort of the anthropology side of things, not so much the, machines and, AI type stuff. And then it's
Mm.
also speculative fiction. So there's something that happens in the book. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but it was something that sort of didn't fall under fantasy and it didn't fall under sci-fi. So it was like more speculative. So it's kind of a lot of things. Um, so yeah, it was interesting trying to find like what genre or genres is this book
Man,
because yeah.
you're singing my song. Because I feel the exact same way about romance. Like I think romance is pivotal. Like every good movie, every good book that I've had has like romance scenes that I can honestly think back on. I mean, I grew up
Yeah.
on Percy Jackson, on like
Mm-hmm.
the whole Rick Riordan Greek history thing, right? And I think back to the whole relationship between Percy and Annabeth frequently. But that's not what I think back on. Like what I think back on is like all the cool animorphs and like all the things, but like their love story was so intertwined with the story and the lore that I fell in love with, that I fell in love with the relationship.
Yeah.
But I can't say I like romance stories. Like it's never a thing I go out for. But I
Yeah.
think romance has to be in like a little. It's exactly how you said, just a drop. It's like salt on like when you're making like a cake, just a little bit, and it makes everything sweeter.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Because all I was gonna say is I actually didn't even know. To this day I don't know what speculative fiction is. I thought that was just like when you didn't know where things was, you would just say SP. Honestly.
Like the everything that you don't know fits into this file.
Yeah.
Well, I think speculative fiction is sorry, I don't know the actual term offhand.
You know I don't.
But it's but it's basically like something that isn't quite a magic system. It's not fantastical, but you can sort of almost prove it in some way and bend the truth just a little bit. So in this instance, the thing that happens is I still use science to prove why it's happening, but it isn't scientifically possible. So like in the book, there's a lot of factual things that are scientific that are actually real, but there's a couple little things I've sprinkled in there because it's fiction that isn't real, and I've kind of bent reality a little bit, so you won't be able to tell the difference. Hopefully, like you'll just be falling into this world and believing every little detail that you read, right?
Yeah. I think we're like kind of kin and the writing that we are, because as you described that, I'm realizing that some of my works actually might be speculative too. It's just
Okay.
I didn't know, because if you ask me, I'm sci-fi and that's it. But as I figure out genres, I'm realizing there's a lot. Like I also do a little bit of dystopia, not post-apocalyptic, but sci-fi. I would say mine is hard sci-fi because my background is in engineering, and all the things that I talk about in the book I actually make like blueprints for,
Oh, cool.
and like I put them in between the chapters, uh, and kind of like that's just like the way that like the things grow. But again, it's just so hard to like know, and like because there's no it's not like the MPAA that like rates movies that you can just like turn your stuff in. They go like, oh yeah, this is what it is. You just say it.
Yeah.
If I felt like putting romance on there, I could do that. You could do that. There's nobody stopping me. There's no, are you really gonna get a bad review where it goes like, hey, I bought this because it said romance. Where's the romance? There was only like 4 books. There was only like 4 pages on it. I want a refund. I was gonna do that. You can do whatever you want. You can just throw everything in there.
Yeah. Well, part of I know genres can be so hard because sometimes you feel like you're limiting yourself. And I didn't want to label Age of the Almek as a hard sci-fi, because then, someone who is picking up this book and expecting hard sci-fi, they're not going to get it, and I don't want them to feel let down. So there's kind of there's ways around it, right? So soft sci-fi. And then there's also like I was constantly looking up definitions of genres to try to understand what they mean. Like dystopian is basically like oppressed future, a oppressed society, right? And post-apocalyptic is following a global event of some sort, and it's a subgenre of sci-fi. So there's all these little it's confusing, right? Like
that's something. Yeah, I really didn't know that either. Yeah, because I would say mine is dystopian, but like the people don't know they're oppressed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more like and because my idea of utopia is like and again, I'm actually glad that you just brought that up, because I remember as you were describing dystopia, I always thought dystopia fell under one thing, that it was kind of like the Big Brother 1984, but you just helped me realize that there's actually branches within, like there's different ways to go about dystopian. Because because you described it, man, what was the way that you phrased it earlier? It was like
about dystopian being a future oppressed society.
Yeah, but it was like that. It only happens to like societies or like countries. I can't remember how you termed it. Damn.
I can't remember either. Sorry.
Oh well.
Like I'm just rambling. I don't know what did I say.
No, basically it was the idea that the people are oppressed. Oh, and the whole idea of masters and everything like that. Yes. So yeah. So my idea of dystopia is that you have a utopia and the people actually think that everything is great, and then they slowly start realizing that they're being oppressed, like kind of it's kind of like an allegory for the system that we are now. How like, like you sit back, it's like, oh, we live like great lives, and you start doing all the math, and it's like, oh, but like we're really in debt for like ever.
Yeah.
And then, it's like things like that. And it's
Hmm.
like that's what I really like love. But the way that you described your version of like the way that you went about dystopian, the way that the story is constructed,
Hmm.
I don't know. It's just like a different route. And I love the way that that's like being presented and the way that the story's like structured and everything about it. Do you ever think you're gonna like change formats and go with like a different route? Not with dystopian, but do you ever think you're just gonna go fully on a different page and just like maybe try something more humorous, or what do
When
you
I'm
think?
done the series,
Yeah, like what do you think for the future?
um, so far I haven't. Uh, I think I found like my home. Like
Mm,
I love writing this type of content. I have written a couple historical short stories, and I really do enjoy historical fiction
yeah,
as well.
I read that.
Oh, cool. Thanks. But I don't know, to be honest. I'm always open to trying new things. I do have another kind of dystopian post apocalyptic standalone book idea for when I'm done
Nice.
this series. Um, I don't know. We'll see where it takes me. There's a couple little instances of humor in this book. A couple of the characters bring humor into Age of the Almec, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't say, even though I love humor, I love watching it. I wouldn't say, writing a whole bunch of humor is my strength. I think
Mm,
that my strength is in the thrilling sort of tension, action packed scenes. I really enjoy writing those. I really come to life when I come alive when I write those.
yeah.
Um, so I don't know. We'll see. It's my first book, and there's a lot of room to grow. So we'll see.
Well, I'm really interested because uh like do you ever plan on making maybe like a graphic novel, especially that you're talking about that like really intense fighting scenes? Like I can't imagine a better medium for like a fighting scene than graphic novel, other than like a full out movie or a TV show.
I've never considered a graphic novel. Maybe,
Yeah, that'd be
maybe,
awesome.
yeah,
It's like kind of where I have like my eye on, but I'm just it's a lot more work than writing. I mean, like awesome thing
yes,
about writing is that it's just, I mean, outside of like an editor and everything like that, but for the most part, it's just on you, right? You just sit
Mhm.
down with your laptop, your iPad, however you do it, and you crank it out. I actually do a lot of writing for my phone, like on my, I'll
Oh
be watching
wow.
like TV, I'll watch like Doctor Who and get like inspired and just like pause it and do like a little like writing session, then like,
Oh,
be like, all right, cool,
mhm.
toss, pop, keep playing Doctor Who and watching, you know, get some pizza, pet my dogs, be lazy for
Yeah,
a little bit,
yeah,
call it research.
yeah. I'll do that too. Like I'll make notes on my phone. I won't like full out write on my phone, but I'll make notes. So like if I'm watching something and I get some, action inspiration or like character inspiration, I have a folder on my phone and I'll just make notes of like, oh, look into this or, whatever. And yeah, I definitely find that helpful too. Movies and shows I think are so underrated for the way they can help inspire us
Oh my
and what we
God.
can pull from them as
Preach.
writers. Yeah.
Preach. Well, so like the structure of this podcast is that every Monday I release like these, which like are like peer vlogs, which is talking to like fellow authors about, great works, promoting their stuff.
Mhm.
And then on Wednesday, I'll do kind of like a little promo talking about like my own writing stuff. And I've delved just like out of happenstance. It's basically now just me talking about whatever movie or TV show I watched and got inspired for like half hour. That's what I do now.
Yeah.
Because it's unreal how much that is my writing process.
Yeah.
Because like that I started that half of it just to like to show what my writing process is, and it started off with like me explaining all the lore and like the more technical stuff, but I just ran out of it because like how many times am I going to keep repeating what I already said 1,000 times? So
Yeah.
it just became more of like me saying what inspired me currently, and that's always TV shows and movies, always.
Yeah.
Doctor Who, huge inspiration like currently because I'm like rewatching. I remember, and my favorite thing is how you things change when you watch them as an adult. Like
Yes.
you watch like an animated Pixar movie as a kid and you think it's awesome for X reason, and you watch it as an adult and you're like, oh my God. Wally is a huge example of that. You watch Wally as like a kid and you just think it's a cartoon. You watch it as an adult and it's like, this is a horror movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a horror
Mind
movie.
blown.
Yeah.
Mind blown. Yeah. Totally.
And like and I'm a huge sucker for cinematography, and Wally's actually great because if you think about it, that's a silent movie for 50 minutes. No person talks for 50
Yeah.
minutes of that movie.
Hmm.
It's just environmental. things like that is exactly what you said. It's a huge inspiration as a writer because everything that you see as a movie or a TV show, somebody wrote vigorously. So
Mhm.
a writer had to explain, had to bring you through the motions and get you emotionally invested to a robot without words. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Things like
That's
that.
like talent,
Yeah,
right?
that's like things that like get your juices flowing. And it's like, all right, how can I do that?
Yeah.
And on top of that, I think you have to know the industry in order to know what not to do, you know?
Mhm.
Because if you just keep on doing like rehashing like something that's already done, or that's the worst thing ever, right? When you watch like a movie and you realize that your idea's already been kind of taken.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with that in some respect, but I feel like there's, you know, so many stories are that are kind of based on the same idea can be rewritten and, you know, made into something even cooler. Like, have you ever read the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, those stories? Like,
I
they're
Yeah,
so dark and twisted, and then, you know, you have this other version of them that are so, you know, lighter. And like, so I do think it's cool that, and there are authors in the community that will do like remakes of them, and I do think that's cool. I think that takes a certain talent to be able to see something and turn it into something else.
that's
um
100% true.
but I think it just depends on how we operate, how we write, how we think, you know, as individuals, and in terms of like what we can create. And like, I was extremely inspired by the Hunger Games
Yes.
and the Handmaid's Tale and 1984, and, you know, all those things. You know, I'm still working with an oppressed society, right? So that idea, I don't think, is going to go anywhere soon. It's just, how are you going to formulate that idea? How are you going to play it out? That's what's going to get you your audience, right?
Hmm.
Nobody's going to read that book and think, oh, she copied that. Because no, because it's my own creation with, you know, inspiration that came from all these places to create this thing. And I think that's what we just keep doing, right? Like time travel, it's, you know, this idea, and then what are you going to do with that idea? How are you going to show your audience what you're, you know, trying to achieve, or what are you trying to teach them? You know, like, I think we can achieve a lot with working off of those kind of staples, you know?
That is 100% true. I'll definitely revise my thought for that. Because I I
Sorry.
actually no, don't
No.
say sorry. I mean, like that's what's awesome. I'm telling you, I'm not married to any idea. I'm easily swayed.
Yeah, I
If you
am
pr-
too.
yeah, if you pronounce me a good enough argument, I'll be like, hey, yeah, you know what? I don't even like blue that much. I'll go red. But I don't know. Everything is I'm blown away by just like the little nuances of the book, of the writing, the historical fiction, the do you ever think you'll do anything aimed to like children? Because like what you I've picked up so far is that a lot of what you do is like based for mature reading. I love nothing against that, but do you ever think that you, especially as a mother yourself, do you ever think that you'll kind of make something like aimed towards kids?
To be honest, I don't really have much interest in it.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I'm really drawn to more adult content. Um, maybe in the future. I will say that my daughter and I started writing like a little children's book about a year ago together, just kind of playing around, and she was drawing the pictures. I don't know if we'll go through and finish that. I think that'd be really cute and really fun. Um, I don't know. My mom said the same thing, like, write a children's book. I'm like, I don't know if that's my thing. I don't know. Would you be interested in doing that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually think wait, are you asking to partner up or are you asking like that if I would do it in general?
Just asking if you would be, yeah, if you would do it in general, if that's something
Oh,
that interests you.
well, if I can be honest, it's actually it's where I think where I project my career going.
Oh,
If I can
cool.
call it a career. Because the thing is that I like talking about Wally, or I was about to say Wale. Uh but like talking about like all those Pixar movies, one of my favorite things about those aspects is that adults and children can enjoy it.
Yeah.
The thing about Game of Thrones is for awesome how awesome it is. I'm not going to watch it with my nephew. It's not going to happen.
Mhm.
But the thing, like a movie like Soul, I don't know if you just recently watched that. I
Yes.
can sit down with my entire family and we're all laughing,
Yeah.
and we're all like moved in our own different ways. The kids get it on, a surface level. The adults are, losing their mind on like a way on a metaphorical level, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's all the different phases in between. I think that's a really like I think that's the height of writing. To be able
Yeah.
to like just do that, like to be able to produce content that has no limit, no genre, no anything. It's just bow. And
To
to be enjoyed by anything and anybody.
Yeah, to touch viewers or readers across like generations and decades. It is a really cool, powerful thing for sure.
Yeah.
I love Pixar. I love Disney. I love like the classic 90s Disney movies.
Yes.
Um, I enjoy them thoroughly. Yeah, I don't know if I just don't know. Maybe I'm not going to say never, and I'm not going to say it's not possible, but not in this foreseeable future for me.
If I can be honest, I love saying that, but I might just be playing devil's advocate with myself because I have, for as much of the ideas that I have nothing for children stuff, nothing, and I have a whole bunch of stuff for all adult stuff, but there's nothing. Every time I try to think of something PG, it always goes, and then somebody gets decapitated. Oh shit.
Goes dark. Yeah, yeah.
World star, something crazy. But it never, I don't know. Maybe it's like a limitation to myself. Maybe it's just kind of like the way that I like content. I don't know. But as far as like career path, 100%. And I
Yeah.
respect it. I respect it so much. I would love to talk to a children's author because you know
Mhm.
that I get people think. Well, let me just not say people. I have this idea of like children's authors that they're gonna be like a Bob Ross type of person, just like hella nice. But like they're gonna be just a regular writer. They
Yeah.
just write for children. It's
Mhm.
gonna be the same thing. I don't know. I'd love to pick apart that brain. It would be like so. I don't know. Writing is just it's one of my favorite things ever. That's why I asked like at what how did you get started and everything like that. Did you
Mhm.
feel like you knew that you were gonna do this forever, or did you stumble on it and find like love for it there?
Um, I had no clue. I had no
Yeah.
clue that I was going to be into writing. I like I said, my dad passed away when I was 17, and I just took on the role of writing his eulogy. I just took it. I don't know. I can't explain. I think it was just because I was meant to be a writer. And I've always been able to express myself better in writing versus verbally speaking. I'll
Hmm.
like, fumble on my words and stuff and not find the right word when I'm speaking. But when I'm writing, it's like,
It's all about editing.
yeah. And, and I don't know. I just took on that role of writing his eulogy, and then I read it at his funeral. And I think that again, combined with that writing class, was the first time where it was kind of like, shit, you should be doing this. But it took me a couple years to kind of look back on that and be like, whoa, because sometimes when you're in the middle of something, you don't realize what it means, or you don't realize the significance
Oh my god.
until you're older and you're wiser, and you're like, man, if only I understood that then,
Earlier,
right?
I could have been cranking them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm happy the way things worked out. I Not only was I, busy for a period of time with, two little kids back to back and then house renos, I actually was very sick. I had a very bad concussion
Hmm.
and was struggling with my health for many years for that. So that was also why I took a break from writing. And it was just the way it worked out. And then I started to feel better. And then my kids were both in school full time. And it was like, okay, the renos are almost done. Now's the time. You can come back to this.
Hmm.
And I think that's the other thing. I think we have, seasons in our life, right? Where, something particular just feels right in that season. And then we change seasons and something else feels right for that particular season. And so to kind of go back to you with what you said about, okay, right now you're very sci fi, you're very adult content, but that there's going to come a time where you have more time for focusing on the writing children's stories. So there will come that season for you, but right now it's just kind of getting out these ideas that are more urgent for you,
Hmm.
and then you'll probably kind of evolve to get to this next season, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and on top of that, like it's also like different mediums too. Because like as I said, graphic novels, I also do, I definitely see that in the crystal ball. Uh but also like I'm a huge fan for like TV and movies. I'm assuming you are too. Why not, you know, go that step and start doing that? That would
Mm-hmm.
be awesome too. I mean, there's one of my things that I love geeking out on is and one of my favorite, like the reasons I love movies and TV so much is writing only takes you a step because you write a character, right?
Mhm.
Now imagine you make a movie and an actor is so talented that they can make your character even realer than you created. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like, you know, when an
Mhm.
actor like adds like nuances or they go off script and they say something
Yes.
that's even better than what you wrote.
Yeah.
Imagine you being in that room. I'd lose my mind.
Oh my
I'd turn into a
gosh.
puddle. I'd turn
Oh
into a
yes.
puddle. That'd be I would
Easy.
I would poof right there. I'd become dust. There's no point to live anymore. I hit my peak.
Yeah, I think that's like secretly every writer's dream, right? To be like,
Yeah.
because a lot of us, when we write, we picture the things we're writing as if it's happening in a movie, right?
Yeah.
I've spoken to many who have said that, and I know I do
Me
that,
too. Me too.
right?
Yeah.
So it's like you know, you're already attached to this idea of this could be a movie, right? So yeah, it's
Oh
the
my God.
dream.
Yeah, it's the dream. Oh my God. I'm sure you've seen it too with the making of the map or like, you know, working with artists. There's nothing better than like getting something back and being like, oh my God, it's real now.
Yeah,
That thing that I picked
yeah,
up is now it's now a physical thing. I can hold it.
totally. Yeah.
God, I'm telling you, there's nothing better than this industry because I didn't know either. Like my thing is when I was a kid, and again, it was actually what you were talking about. Is like when you think back on it, you have no idea what you're doing, no idea of the relevance, and then when you get older, you pick it apart.
Hmm.
I used to be really into playing with my toys, and I mean like aggressively. I would have like really, really intense plots over my Batman, and like
Yeah.
like my Batman were like the council of toys, and they were like in charge of everything, and there was like all these like you know hidden plots and all these things, and I would get like just like really into them, and my
Hmm.
plot and like they would consist over years. It's not that I would do like a little thing and then change it up with like new toys. It was like nah, it was the same. It
This is
was like,
building. This is
yeah,
getting.
yeah, it
This
was
could be
getting
a
built. Like,
society.
I would build them. Like, I would build like a house, and then like you know, I would just keep on adding it, make a bat cave, and do all these extra things. And my mom would get increasingly more mad because I like you know there would be like a hideout in a closet, and I would get mad like, yo, but they were conducting research. You have no consideration for Batman.
Oh,
Because like you know because in her head and
amazing.
in my head they're real characters, you know, they're like you know
Yeah.
again to I was told that was overactive imagination. If I had like a person
Yeah.
that was a writer in my family, maybe they would have been like, hey, sit down, fucko, maybe
Yeah.
turn this into a thing,
Totally.
you
You
know.
were telling stories from the beginning, right?
Yeah, and I just
Totally.
didn't know, and I was horrible and I mean I never found much interest into like education until like you know end of high school when you need the scramble for finding college, right?
Yeah.
So I did like I never really applied myself until then. So like English and all those things were just like I never cared about anything. I remember like in English class when we would have to like study the history of an author, I would get so mad because I'd be like, bro, how does the history of an author have anything to do with their writing? That doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. That makes no sense. And then of course you get like older and you're like, wait a minute, that has everything to do with writing. I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
to consider that Dr. Seuss went to went through world wars. I mean, it was literally called the Great War because they thought they would never do anything like that. They would never think humans would be that stupid twice.
Hmm. Turns out they were
Yeah,
wrong.
turns out that's always a button we want to press. But
Yeah.
like, I mean, again, everything is just crazy, and I guess that's the reason why like historical fiction is so awesome too, because I was always into history. But
Hmm.
like the thing about history is that like it really just like happens. Like I know that sounds like so like cliche, but like it almost doesn't make sense. Like things that like the amount of times in history that like a major thing, like uh people say that what started World War I was this one guy that was like a consulate in like some country. I can't remember what. I think it was like in Germany,
Hmm.
that he had a heart attack on the week that something happened, and when he died his predecessor stepped up and his predecessors well like started everything off, and people like
Oh
to
wow.
say that one guy dying from a heart attack, like no one killed him, not an assassination, just
Hmm.
that one guy dying, you know, act of God is what kicked off everything else.
Oh
And
wow.
like and if you were like a writer, you know, if you put that in a book, people would like you know get mad over it. It's like that's not real life. It's like yeah it is. Life's
Hmm.
like that. Life's weird.
Hmm.
Like and like that's one of my favorite parts about like writing, like in really good writing it's one of my favorite things when things like that just happen.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like
I think as long as you can prove why, because in real life it happens, you don't have to prove anything,
yeah,
right? But in a book, as long as you can prove why that guy having that heart attack was so impactful for the people living at that time, as long as you can prove it,
Yeah.
you can make any.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of like my favorite things about like just like the industry is that like you study like different ways of doing things that you would never even thought of. Uh, there was one time I read like somebody did like a monologue from no, the prologue from the point of view of the villain, and the way that you read it is that you 100% think you're from the protagonist, and then by the when you get to the end of it, you realize you're reading the point of view of the bad guy, and then it goes off into the book from the point of view of the protagonist. I had never
Oh,
thought of
cool.
doing something like that. You know what I mean? Or just
Yeah.
like different points of views. Again, it's unreal the different ways that you can go about it. Um,
Sorry,
what?
I totally interrupted you. I was really excited about what we were talking about, and I interrupted you. You were talking about the World War I and how it ignited.
Oh my God,
Did
I
you have
do it all the
something else you
time.
wanted to say there?
No, yeah. So like, the whole thing about the World War and how that ignited is that like, again, that really was about it. It's just like so weird how like history just goes off of that,
Yeah.
and like things just like happen, and like sometimes like when there's like a whole rhyme or a reason and you think something has like a further intention or a further reason. I mean, because that's what humans are. The human brain is like a designed to like make form patterns where they can see them. So you
Hmm.
think that everything happens for a reason,
Hmm.
and you think when you come to a writing standpoint, you think the same thing. Like everything that's written has to happen for a reason. I mean, I know I think about that all the time, but in reality, things can just happen. You
Yeah.
know, a simple heart attack, and then like and I think it's one of my favorite parts of like writing because then you as a writer can like choose how to make that entertaining, because then you can simply you can have a dialogue now where the characters are saying that basically with like, are saying what the reader would be thinking. It's like, are you telling me a heart attack? Really? The entire fate of the world on a heart attack, and everyone's like, like talking how crazy that is, and it doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
I don't know. Well, one thing about like we were talking about like writing and everything.
Hmm.
What would you say is your Mount Rushmore for like you're talking about Hunger Games and you're talking about like dystopia? What would you say are your favorite writers, TV shows, movies? What are your things that you draw the most inspiration from?
Oh, I I like kind of like dystopian books with like oppressed society. So 1984, The Handmaid's Tale, The Hunger Games, I really like those. And then again, I was really inspired with like sort of the character developments and sort of political shenanigans and like deceitful things that happen with Game of Thrones. I love that sort of stuff. I wouldn't say I have a favorite writer per se. I don't feel like I've read enough to say this is my favorite author, this is my favorite writer. I don't know. I just there's a lot of works that I like, a lot of people that inspire me, and then um, I don't know. I just get ideas from everywhere. Like sometimes it's hard to really pinpoint what inspires something. Sometimes it's just like you said, there's no reason. It just is. It just
Mm-hmm.
feels right to do this, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I hope I answered that.
No, yeah. Like you might not have favorites, but what are like some of the things like what have you recently seen on like TV or a movie that like really inspired you?
Well, definitely. I'm sorry, going to go back to Game of Thrones. I was watching season 8 as I was in like my 7th revision, roughly, of Age of the Almek. So that was really cool seeing like how everything unfolded and then the ending. And then that it was just awesome to be watching that while I was going through revisions. I'm trying to think of what else inspires me. Different like I would say random things. Like I just started rewatching Breaking Bad. Um, do you like that show?
Oh, it's my favorite show ever. I've rewatched it 3 4 times.
Oh, okay, cool. So this is
Yeah.
my only second time rewatching it with my husband, and um, I just not necessarily that am particularly interested in what they're doing, that I would want to write about that, but just like the character stories, the way they develop, like Walt's character is unbelievable. And so just studying those things and how, they pulled all that off. I don't know. I love that. So Breaking Bad's definitely inspiring me a bit right now. Um, What else have I been watching? I
Man,
feel
that's
like
awesome. Not sorry to interrupt you, but that's awesome about
yeah.
the Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is actually one of my top three inspirations, like of all writing of all time ever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
Breaking
cool.
Bad, Black Mirror, and
Black Mirror.
Hitchhiker
Yes.
and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
That's the goat for me. Best ever made ever.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh, and
I like Black
Frankenstein.
Mirror.
Frankenstein is unreal.
Oh, cool.
It's become a very poppy because like
Mhm.
it's like high school reading at level, but like it really is a marvel, especially like when it was made at the time. I mean,
Mhm.
Homegirl wrote it as like a dare.
Mhm.
Like
Oh, that's cool.
her husband and her husband's friend, they all went out to like some trip, and they were all and both of them were like established writers.
Mhm.
And they started penning their own works, and then like out of a dare, they were like, "Oh yeah, what a LOL, you're a woman, why not? Okay." And she wrote Frankenstein,
That's amazing.
and I
I
don't even know what the other guys wrote. You know,
yeah. Garbage. No, I'm just kidding.
garbage. She
I
wrote
actually need
Frankenstein.
I need to read Frankenstein. I need to read it.
Oh my god. If talking about like a imaginative like story structure, so the book is like layered. So it starts off with letters to Frankenstein, who's the doctor, and
Mhm.
then like letters that from his sister to Frankenstein, and then a letter from the monster to Victor. And
Oh,
then it
cool.
starts off with a story. And then
Mhm.
it ends again with the letters, kind of like swishing it all together. And
Mhm.
like it just goes crazy. Like it's one of those things that like you watch so many versions of it on TV that
Mhm.
like neuter it basically. That when you go
Oh
back
yeah.
to it's like the Brothers Grimm. You watch like
Mhm.
Disney Channel versions of it and you think that's what it is, and you go and read the OG and you're like, oh my god, this
Mhm.
witch was literally fattening up kids. I don't know why I thought that was cute. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
definitely need to read it. Oh, another inspiration is Outlander. I don't know if you know the TV series. I
I
haven't read the books. Do you know the TV series, or have you
I've
read?
heard of it. Please.
Okay. It's by Diana Gabaldon, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's about a woman who travels from the 1940s, I want to say, back to the 1700s. Again, character inspiration. I actually had someone message me and say, uh, your character, a couple of your characters are reminding me a little bit of two of these characters on Outlander. Like there's like something a little bit about them that's sort of familiar. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like there's definitely little bits of inspiration, like I said, of all these different things sprinkled in my book. And when I first started writing Vera, she was really inspired by Claire, the main character in Outlander. Just this sort of like independent, stubborn female lead character. And she was different from I felt any of the other characters that I had read about or watched. And again, Outlander, yes, it's known as a romance, but there's so many other cool things that there's fight scenes and like the war, like so many cool things that happen in this show.
Hmm.
But yeah, the characters were a source of inspiration for sure.
Outlander. I need to pick up. I need to. I've seen the adverts of it, and it's a Prime show, no?
I think there's some seasons on Netflix,
Oh,
I
is it on Netflix?
feel.
Hmm.
But yeah, you'll probably find it on Prime or maybe Crave. It's been a while since I've
Oh,
watched it, but yeah.
man, I gotta say, I'm still kind of reeling on the Breaking Bad thing. Breaking Bad is one of my favorite. Like I even my story structure is inspired from Breaking Bad.
Oh yeah.
Inspired is actually a really nice term. I would say stolen, plagiarized,
Yes.
because like I remember as I was like because I do plot. I don't write it down. I have a pretty like decent memory, so I just plot in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember as I was plotting the story, and you actually like go from the a jump of turning the story into an actual book that you're writing it down. So when I went from like the lore in my head to like the actual story level,
Yeah.
I was trying to picture like how the what point of view, character, how the chapter's gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was watching the episode where like it's like starts off with like a black and white zoom of like a car jumping up and down like hydraulics, and it keeps on slowly going down. Like there's like and like the more it zooms out, the more questions you have.
Yeah, I
It's
love
like
that. I
yeah,
love
and
that.
like the bullets
So,
are rattling from the sides, and
yeah.
the scene is just weirder. You see like little hints of blood, and
Mm-hmm.
then down, 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 bow, bang,
Yeah. So good.
and then like the story goes in, and it goes from like Walter getting a pizza, something in like
Yeah.
innocuous, like that you don't even care about, and then by the end, 50 minutes later, you understand the hydraulics. And that's one, like, I right there, as I just understood, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. So I started off the scene with, like, basically at the end of the series, a little like snippet, and then the story kicks in, and then like the whole question is that you kind of like, as the story goes on, you kind of understand how much the character has changed from that snippet to now. Well,
I
like
love
vice
that.
versa, Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. It's why you gotta love like the inspiration reading different people's characters. Again, I'm still reeling on the rules in between the chapters. That's insane.
Mhm.
Rules in between the chapters. My God, that's so cool.
Oh, good. Glad you like it. I was
Yeah,
like, I wasn't sure if I should do that, and had some serious talks with my developmental editor about it. Like, do we want to lay this all out? Should we? Yeah, okay. It's kind of cool for readers to reference back to that, right?
no,
Yeah.
I honestly, I think not only that, but I think it's genius how it's plotted, because it starts out with the prologue explaining how the society got to be, like, the
Hmm.
genesis, and then
Hmm.
the rules, bow,
Hmm.
which is like, if you're kind of like studying it, like, it's almost like a history book, because it's being like rolled out to you exactly how it's plotted. So
Hmm.
they make society, and then literally like right before the chapter ends, he goes like, all right, we're gonna have to make a set of rules.
Hmm.
And then you turn the chapter, and then there are literally, I think, what, 30 something rules, and then
40, I think. Oh,
40,
I should
right?
know.
Yeah,
I should know. This is terrible. I'm pretty sure it's 40. 40 laws. Yeah, I'll give you a little snippet. Here's the map.
yeah,
Doo-doo-doo. And then prologue. Where are you, laws? And then the laws of the
yeah.
motherland. Yeah.
So that's
So yeah,
40, right?
40. Yeah.
Yeah. And then again, and it's what we were talking about in the beginning. It gives you like so much like little nuances and little things like that. It's like, oh, what's an insignificant? Oh, why is this people favorite? And they have to work half a week that the fucking regular people do. And then like it's just like, and it's awesome because it one of my favorite things about writing is how everything is like allegorical to the environment that we live in and the world that we live in, right? I'm
Mhm.
assuming that the idea of the insignificance is from the caste system in India, where they have the untouchables. No.
No,
Oh, in
no,
India.
I didn't know. Tell me about this.
Yeah, in India they have a caste system, which is actually like a remnant from like British imperialism. So
Okay.
the well, I guess there's actually a debate about that. I read like an article that like they actually had that before, but whatever. But basically a caste system is kind of the idea that you had that like in the book, that you're born in a caste. If your father is a farmer, that means that that's that caste system. And when son after that, like that's a caste system. That's what you're doing. So
Okay.
but they also believe in reincarnation, that you could go back as an XYZ type of thing.
Hmm.
But so the lowest thing that they have is untouchable, and they are, I mean, they're to call them homeless is like nice. I mean, like they can't, there's certain laws that prevent them from working, from doing anything. Like they're the lowest of low. People like regularly throw like acid and like shit at them.
Oh
Oh
gosh.
yeah, I mean, they're literally called untouchables. Like they're not
Crazy.
allowed to be touched by the rest of society.
Wow.
And yeah, and the reason they, their game plan, the reason like that society accepts that, is because they believe in reincarnation. Like, yeah, you could be an untouchable, but you can reincarnate it and be, a Buddha. Well,
Mm-hmm.
not a Buddha, but a Dali,
Oh.
which is like the human version of it, or whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
Vishra, whatever. Well, not
Mm-hmm.
not whatever. I'm not trying to, offend that religion. I just don't know
Yeah.
the name.
Yeah. Hmm. I get
uh,
you.
yeah. Well, again, it's just like it's crazy what humans do, and it's the whole thing that we were talking about before with the World War. Is that
Yeah.
like, for a second you always have like this like thing of like, oh, humans aren't that stupid, and then you think back, it's like, oh no, yeah, we are 100%, we are.
Oh yeah.
I can't tell you the amount of times I'll be watching a movie and it's like, oh dude, they're not gonna start a whole war over one girl. And you think
Yeah.
back, oh, Trojan War,
Yeah.
War of 1898.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, oh no, that's actually one of the most likely things we'll do.
Yeah. But it's
uh
funny too, because as a writer, I feel like, my husband and I will be watching something and he will get angry over those things. He'll be like, no, how could you? Why would you? And I'll be like, yeah, they did. It's genius. It makes absolute sense why they did that.
yeah, because that emotion, because it knows you're gonna be like, oh, that makes no sense, but for whatever reason you're gonna keep reading it, because now you're mad. You're like, oh really, what's gonna happen now
Hmm.
then?
Hmm.
uh oh, there's nothing better. Well, do you have any closing thoughts or anything else that you want to kind of promote? Anything more about what's coming soon from Link Publishing?
Um, well, I'm working on book 2 in the Almek series right now, and it's still very fresh in the new stages. Um, I can't foresee that it's going to be coming out this year, so I won't offer any, like, you know, to be determined release dates or anything. We'll see how it goes.
Mm,
Um, yeah, nothing really to say. Just if you're interested, check out Age of the Almec. It's a pretty exciting read, and it has a little bit of something for everyone, I think. But it is, focused towards a mature audience. So if you don't have a stomach for gore, then I wouldn't read it, or you can skip over those scenes too. I know some people might do that, right? They're
yeah,
interested in the characters and they skip over those gory scenes. But yeah, I hope you'll check it out. It's on Amazon, and you can follow me on Instagram at Tara A. Lake for little updates here and there about it.
definitely.
That's
And you need
it.
to pick up that book. I, honestly, three questions just popped into my head that I'd be remiss if I don't ask.
Yeah.
Because you were talking about the historical fiction. What is your favorite time frame, and like what is, without giving any spoilers of like things that you'll write, but like what is something you want to work with? One thing I love, an idea that I don't have, but I really want to play around with, is a person that gets like sent back like really far, like 300 million years, and like the thing that's going to be like dinosaurs, but it's actually human society still, and like
Oh,
we've just forgot.
cool.
I've always played around with the idea, and I would love doing it. I just haven't done it yet. Do you have
Yeah.
anything like that like you just like, man, I'm meaning to do this?
I don't have anything like that. No. I I still kind of write. I enjoy writing about sort of civilized sort of things where there's a bit of a society happening. I don't know if I would go back that far. I haven't really thought about it. I think I need um to get these next few stories out of my head, and then I'll maybe touch more on historical fiction, but I don't have any like real, and nothing really pulling me right now, I guess. But your
Yeah.
idea sounds really cool. I hope you do that. It sounds so interesting.
Well, if I can be honest, it was kind of like a dream. What it was that like well, not really a dream like I was sleeping. It was more of like a daydream, which was kind of like thinking about things. And like what I thought was like kind of like a character looking up from Earth, like having just like teleported back, and like he looks up and the Earth has a ring around it of
Mm-hmm.
water.
Oh,
And like
cool.
the deluge, like like the Noah's flood, like that thing is actually from the Earth's gravity condensing and losing that ring, and that water collapsed onto the Earth.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah, and then like the whole thing of like Gabriel's angel and all that thing is actually from like technological things. That's one of my favorite things, is like rewriting like what we thought XYZ was into like a sci-fi version.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's one of my
Cool.
yeah, because I grew up Catholic and things, and then like obviously you start like developing different things as you grow up and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of my favorite things because like when you get a little bit older, you start realizing that's like, all right, maybe this isn't 100% fictional. I mean, 100% real. This story might be a little allegorical,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you start playing around with that idea and you like trying to like make it into your own fiction, I mean, like, again, one of my favorite things, like the Indians actually believe like the whole idea of sci-fi to like the Hindu religion is like outrageous. Well, not outrageous. It's like asinine. They're like their idea of the Genesis is the same Genesis from like the Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
but the idea of like they outright basically say it was aliens. Like visitors from other planets came, and we
Mm-hmm.
called them gods, and they had a war in the sky,
Mm-hmm.
and then like like eventually the technologies fell upon humans, and then like we worked with like that's like their version of Genesis. It's like
Mm-hmm.
them outright saying it like that. And then you look at like the Roman, the Celtic, all the different versions of it, and they say the same thing, but they just like dress it up more religiously. Know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And like more
Mm-hmm.
faith based and like things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, little things like that is like that's my driving force for inspiration. I mean, think
Cool.
about
Yeah.
the ascension of Jesus. It's like a beam,
Yeah.
but like an alien, the UFO beam, that's like the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like everything is like how you want to like twist it, and like
For sure. You can make a
yeah,
story. For sure. That'd
yeah.
be a story. You know what would be a really cool story? Have you ever heard of flat earth believers?
I put that's in my story.
Oh!
I swear to God, because I was so perplexed with the idea that it made no sense to me that I flipped the opposite side. So in
Oh,
my story, the government makes people believe that the world is flat, and then they
oh my gosh.
realize that it's not.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah,
Because I was gonna say that is outrageous. Because I was gonna say, like, it'd be really cool to play around with that. Like, make, just
yeah.
that's
No,
awesome.
yeah, the exact same idea. Because I remember as I was writing, it just made no sense to me. I was like, wait, but like, if you think that the world is flat, that's like less oppressive than the world being global. Like, no, like that
Yeah.
whole idea of that thing is like an idea of like control, right? Then like, how does it make a difference? Like, you still have to build a spaceship to get out of here. It doesn't. What are you talking? You know what I mean? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're oppressed either way. What is the point here? Even if
Yeah.
it were flat, it doesn't change your day. Why are you getting so mad about it? You still
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to, you still got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. For
It's like when
sure.
people start like question the whole idea of like simulation theory that like we all live in a simulation. I was like, listen, that doesn't make your life any less or more significant. You still got to wake
Hmm.
up.
Hmm.
Like all the things that you value are still valuable to you. Everything is
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally. Yeah.
or like the life of a fly. I love thinking about that too. How like a fly only lives like a day, and people
Isn't
always
it
go
like
like,
16 days or
is
something?
it? Look, I
I
don't.
don't know. It's
I have
short
no idea.
anyway.
It's short.
Short.
I know it's short.
So
Yeah.
it's about whatever.
But like, so and people always say it's like, oh, can you imagine living a life that short? It's like, nah, dude, imagine that.
Their times,
Yeah,
right?
their time, like they must live, like their perception of time must be like fractions. That must be
Yes.
why we can never catch them. You know what I
Yes.
mean? We're over here going like, like think we're like ninjas, going as fast as possible. And to them, we're like, they're like,
Oh yeah.
yo,
Yeah. Yeah. They're just like, I'm just gonna dodge over
I'm
here a
just gonna
little
go
bit.
over here.
But
I'm gonna go over
hey,
here.
you know how you can catch a fly? I've done this before.
What?
If you like go like this in front of it and you're distracting it and then you swoop in from behind, that's how I've caught a fly. Only a couple times. It's not like
Really?
it's not foolproof, but I've done it.
My thing is actually like so their perception of time is so fast that if you move real slow, it's like you're not moving. It's like the Guardians of the Galaxy joke. So like
Oh,
so if you do like just like approach them real small,
yeah.
and then like like when you're like right there, just go in for the grab, you can catch them pretty often.
Oh, cool. I'll have to try
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah, because I'm not PC when it comes to insects. You know what I mean? I'm right where I have a gun. I was like, no insects in this house. If I see a mosquito, a fly, gone. Ding, I'm going.
Yeah.
I'll pause TV
Oh
to
yeah.
kill a fly. I have no way.
Hmm. I agree
Um,
with you on that. Yuck. And they're
you,
just annoying too.
you know what? I think that's why I love sci-fi, like the sci-fi genre so much, because like you can even play around with things like that, like bugs that you don't like, and you can
Hmm.
make like alien bugs that are even more annoying.
Hmm.
Or like Hitchhiker's Guide of the Galaxy had a frog that was on a swamp planet that its like ribbit was you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die.
Oh, that's
And then like
amazing.
and then like the main characters, there's like, oh, you don't think that's a little like like foreshadowing? And the guy goes like, ah, no, don't be so don't be so negative. That's just how they
Hmm.
ribbit. That's just how you sound. Like just because that's just that like that how did he write it? He said that's only because of your human ears you hear it like that. If you were from this planet, it would just sound like a ribbit to you. And
Oh,
like
that's neat.
again, like it's like things like that that are just like awesome. Or a
Hmm.
world of the World of Worlds by H.G. Wells.
Hmm.
They an alien invasion got duped by a common cold because the aliens with all their advanced technology could never figure out like the infection rate of humans. So the moment a cold cell got to the alien, it literally
Hmm.
wiped out their entire society.
Oh, that's crazy cool. I haven't read that one. I need to read it.
Again, everything there's nothing better than this, man. It's just like the whole writing aspect. Do you have a guilty pleasure, like a movie or a book that like you would like you're almost like embarrassed to tell people that you like it? I love Tokyo Drift, Fast and Furious. I don't know what it is. That movie's
Mm.
horrible, but man, is it good.
So is Tokyo Drift like one of the series or one of
Yeah,
the sequels?
yeah. It's
Because
the
there's like
third
eight.
one. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the third one.
Okay. I'm trying to think
The fact that I
what
know that.
I
I'm
you
telling
love it.
you.
I like silly stuff. Like I like Schitt's Creek. It's a
Hell yeah, I know
Canadian
what you're
TV
talking about. Yeah, yeah,
series.
yeah.
I like Life in Pieces.
I haven't seen that one.
Um, I still watch Modern Family.
Modern Family is genius.
It's so good, and it only gets
Genius.
better as the seasons go on.
It's genius.
Yeah, totally.
Gloria takes out the gun, ta, and they're just like, "How do you do that?" She's like, "I can unbutton your shirt if I wanted to. Get out the pool. Hurry up."
Right. She's awesome. One thing I'll say is I do read nonfiction. Like I like self-growth, sort of self-help books.
Okay.
And my favorite one is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. That one's
Nice.
really great. That was actually what I started really reading when I was in my late teens and early 20s. So how I got into fiction writing, I don't really know, but I don't think I'd ever write nonfiction, but I love,
Yeah, likewise.
you love nonfiction too?
No, likewise, I would never write
Oh,
nonfiction.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a thing that I feel like is just kind of, it's not, nonfiction isn't talked about as much in the writing community.
Hmm.
But I do love it.
Well, I gotta tell you, my favorite nonfiction is actually by a fiction writer. Uh, what's his name? Aldous Huxley, the guy that wrote Brave New World.
Yeah.
So he and you want to talk about like geniuses, writers that predict things. So he talked about gene manipulation about 20 years before we knew what the gene was.
Mm-hmm.
Like like what a DNA strand. He talked about DNA manipulation before we knew what the DNA strand was. Like that's how like outrageous this dude was in like intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And cloning and things like that before we even knew like the rigorous like the structure of what the science was. Before we even knew the
Oh,
idea, he was talking about it and wrote
that's
about it.
insane.
So what he did is 30 years after he wrote that, he wrote a book basically kind of like talking about his views on like his book and how like it impacted society.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Braving a New World. And what he was talking about was like the issue of population. And he has like an allegory, like a not an allegory, and an analogy in it that is like
Mm-hmm.
almost oppressing with how real it is. And I think about it all the time in my writing, and that it's inspired a lot of like aspects of my writing too. And what he was talking about was like imagine a little population in Madagascar, and they have an infestation rate of cholera that limits their population to 1,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now let's say some Christian missionaries come in and they clear out the cholera problem and they leave. So they clear out the cholera problem, and now the population is able to boom. Now they went from 1,000 to 15,000 to 30,000, but now their environmental mass isn't able to keep up with their population rate anymore, right? Before,
Mm-hmm.
not like nature made that 1,000 because that 1,000 was perfect. They had enough food to kill and hunt without without killing off the animals. It was enough that the animals were breeding enough that we could kill them, but they would still, there would still be a regular population, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything was like an ecosystem. Everything was like perfect. But then it jumps up to 30,000, and now animals are going extinct. Fishes are being overfished. So that colony now has to go and start war with land for another with another colony. So what he was like kind of like postulating is like if you zoom out over this 100-year period, you try to save the lives of 1,000, and now you just massacred like 100,000 because now they're gonna die from malnutrition and they're gonna die from needless war. Whereas if you would have leave them at that 1,000 rate, they would have just stayed perfectly undisturbed.
Mm-hmm. Balanced.
Yeah, balance like
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that sounds like really negative because it's like the pot, like you always want to say like, oh no, we'll find a way to persevere, but it's, when you think about it like that, it's like Jesus, that's pretty tough when you think about it that way, because
Mm-hmm.
that's human thing. People always say that, like, especially with the news now, that like humans are negative. I really do not think so. I really think that the whole thing between like Locke and Hobbes, I think humans are innately good, then the
Mm-hmm.
world is kind of fucked up, and then like
Yeah.
you just kind of get jaded as you go along. But like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think anyone has an intention of malice. I think most people just want to like help one another. So if you
Mm-hmm.
see a thing like cholera, you want to go help it, and then you just don't foresee what happens 100 years later.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's like the Black Mirror thing, or like any
Yeah.
technology. You just never know until like it comes out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think we're born good, right? We're infants. We don't, we're innocents. We
Yeah.
don't have, traumas. We don't see the ugly parts of the world until we grow and we age and we have experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and those experiences affect who we become. But I look at people like, I think most people do. I think you're right. I think most people mean well, and often bad things are misunderstandings,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Because we can only see things from the window of our own perception, right?
Yes.
But this is where I feel torn, because then you have people like Hitler, and I don't think that anything Hitler did was good. I don't think he had good intentions,
Even from youth.
but I think within the perception of his own window, he thought he was doing something that was good for humanity. I genuinely think he thought he was doing good and he was making a positive difference in the world.
I believe that too.
Because, right?
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know. It's interesting to think
Yeah.
about those things. And that's what's fun with playing with villains, because it's like they can think what they're doing is right. Right?
That is
It's
what I'm
just all
saying. Yeah, because like people always like, I mean, because I, especially like some of you were saying, I love a lot of random things too. And people always like ask me like, how do these things correlate? And it's exactly what you just said. It's like when you study humans like that, then you can like write humans that are like really provoking. I just started watching Sopranos. Tony Soprano is one of my favorite complex characters so far. Like
Oh
how a
yeah.
person can be so genuinely cruel on
Mm-hmm.
one aspect and then so genuinely like a sweetheart and another. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? Like you can't tell me that the dude doesn't love his family, like what you've seen. But then like you
Mm-hmm.
see what he does, and it's like Jesus, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's you just love everything about it. And specifically quoting Sopranos, like as far as the character development thing, that show is gold tier because it's like I feel like oftentimes when you watch like a TV show, there's like five characters that are really, really complex, and
Mm-hmm.
then the rest are kind of like plot devices. I feel like in that show, every single character you see is a complex character with like their own deep like history and things like that. Like you can almost change the point of view of the story
Mm-hmm.
to another character at any point you wanted because that's how like in depth they made that like little like story of Sopranos. It's phenomenal.
That's cool. I actually haven't watched it, but it sounds pretty intriguing.
Look, one of my favorite the thing that always stopped me from watching it is that I thought it was like a Goodfellas type of thing. Not that I don't like Goodfellas, one of my favorite movies, but
Mm.
like I didn't think I needed a whole 8 seasons of like a mob drama. It's
Yeah.
not. It's actually what it is. It's a mob boss going to a therapist. It's actually a comedy. It's actually a dark comedy self help. Because what ends up happening is that he Tony's a very smart character, which is why it's like awesome because he's uneducated, but he thinks a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
like he'll whack a person, whatever, and then like he'll really like think about like what like human like innate human like well he'll have the argument like the argument well he'll have like the discussion we just had about good versus bad. He'll
Mm-hmm.
have that after whacking a person. it's
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. It's like really
And he'll justify like, oh, I did this because it protects my family, or it's this, right? He justifies how it's okay to do it,
well
but
that's the
still feels that guilt.
No, you see, that's the best part is that it's not always justified to him. There's certain times that he'll do something and then be like, oh, I really might have made a mistake there. And
Oh,
like
okay, I
yeah, and
see.
then he
Oh,
really
cool.
feels that weight because he's the boss of the family, and you understand like what that means. Like it's not
Yeah.
that it's not like he's like your boss. Well, I don't know your working situation, but like it's not like your boss at McDonald's that like like he tells you what to do when you go home.
Mm-hmm.
This is the boss of a family.
Mm-hmm.
Every aspect of your life is okayed by this man.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you do when you get married, what I'm saying, he's the one picking out like where you're gonna go, like well, like what I'm saying, if somebody gets whacked during your wedding, everyone has to leave. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's a whole different type of thing. It's more of like of a god king position,
Mm-hmm.
which is such an interesting concept, like the Shaka Khans and like the historical leaders like that. Jim
Mm-hmm.
Jones kind of more recently. uh Human aspect is like it's so interesting, and it makes it so much like more fun to read. And I'm sure you got that from like Regan too. Did you do any like studying into like Manson or any like people like that to like get into the character for Regan?
No, I didn't. No, I just had this sort of feeling. Like I said, I just had this, and again, like influencing just from all the characters I've been watching and reading over the years, and kind of studying how, a villain can be developed and how I wanted to develop him. But no, I just had this feeling and kind of went with it about, okay, who he is as a person, and what he's capable of and why he's capable of it.
Mm.
um but you, with what you mentioned about the guy from Sopranos, it reminds me a little bit of the leader on, did you watch Man in the High Castle?
I've read parts of the book, but I haven't watched the TV show. Is it good? Because I'll watch it right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I loved the first season. We haven't watched much more beyond that because we got distracted, but His character was so interesting. And just like you could see, like at first it was kind of, I don't know, you could see like how he still felt things for the terrible things he did. And he did that. He definitely justified it in his own mind, but it was like you could see he was feeling, he's human and he was feeling the guilt, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just cool seeing the sort of weaker side and the more raw human side of the villains too.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of my favorite things is that like the idea that like what is a villain? Maybe it's just a person that's just justified. Like, the difference between like a mob boss and a police chief is just that the mob boss thinks they both think they're doing the right thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they just go about it in different ways. They're both using weaponry, they're both doing XYZ, they both have kind of like a brotherhood type of mentality,
Mm-hmm.
but they just go about it in different ways, right? They have different idea of what law is because mob have laws too. They just go by a different set.
Yeah.
So that's actually the prologue, honestly. Everything you described is actually my prologue. It's remember that whole little scene that I talked about inspiration from Breaking Bad? So
Yeah.
what it is that you have kind of like the big like the leader of the world. You know what I mean? The leader of the free world. And it's basically right when he's about to die and he's talking about basically all his regrets, like realizing that like everything that he did wasn't really out of a leader. It was just out of ego. And like kind of like realizing like
Mm-hmm.
a line that took me because I actually it took me forever to write that prologue too. Prologues are hard, huh?
Mm-hmm.
It took like no lie, I think it took like 2 or 3 years of revisions just on the prologue because I would write it and think it would be okay, and then get to like chapter 5, and then like go back there and be like, oh, this is horrible, and rewrite that and go to chapter 7, and like it
Yeah.
was just like an ongoing thing. Uh, but and then like it finally developed, and a line that took me forever to write was like kind of like the character having like an internal monologue, and then he says like basically it's like, oh, it's like all these years wasted trying to fill a cup that never had a bottom.
Oh.
Why did it take me so long to realize that wasn't the issue? Like
Mm-hmm.
basically saying that like like he obviously had some deep internal emotional thing that was the actual hole in his heart, and
Mm-hmm.
like he just filled it in another way, and just like how did it take me so long? Like this is not what I meant to do. And then it ends with him saying like I should have just been like a doctor or done some shit,
Oh,
left this politics to somebody
crazy.
else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, it sounds great.
yeah, and then like you actually go into the story, and like the character is nowhere that empathetic. It's like it's just a complete animal, just like
Mm-hmm.
he's a leader,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no in betweens, and he's just like real charismatic to the public facade, but then like a complete just rolling over employees, not giving a single. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's great.
you gotta love the thing, and I saw a lot of that like the emotional development in your book, which again I cannot read to keep finishing your book. Age of the Almek. I'm sorry, you need to pick it up. Every person that's listening on there on Amazon, Kindle. Did you say are there any other venues that you have like can you get off the website too?
No, just Amazon for now.
Just Amazon. All right. Well, that
Yeah.
is enough. Make sure to pick it up. And the short stories too. I really recommend them. Do you think you're ever gonna kind of make a maybe like publish an anthology series with all your short stories after like a couple of years?
I would love to do that. I've been thinking about that for a little while. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe at some point.
Yeah, I want to do that too.
Yeah.
I think short stories are like a lost art. I think I have like
Yeah.
I think I have like 6 of them.
Yeah,
They're
cool.
fun. Yeah, they're fun to write. And they all
Yeah.
range too. Like they range from as short as like 300 words to
Mm-hmm.
like 4,000. That's like the
Nice.
highest I got. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful,
That's
John.
awesome.
Yeah, it's a beautiful medium. Um,
Yeah.
well, again, sorry to take up your time. We were supposed to like end, but my,
We could just keep talking.
oh yeah, we could
It's
do
so
that.
fun. So fun. No,
We
I
could,
mean, like we could. I'm just saying we could talk all day. We've got a lot to chat about. It's fun.
oh, well,
Awesome.
honestly, what is, well, you said that like your first thing of was a subtle art of not giving a fuck. That was your first thing. But what was
Yeah.
your first fiction that you read? I'm sorry. Like, what was the first time that like you were like, oh, this is what fiction is? Wow.
Um, we don't actually have to keep talking. I will answer that and then I'll let you go because I know you got to end your podcast. But I actually when I was like 20, I think I was reading the Twilight series, and I liked them at the time. I was a pretty big fan of them at the time. And any fiction I read in high school, I was not into. I was just not into it. And um, and then as time evolved, I'll still watch the movies. Like my daughter likes them, so I'll watch the movies with her of Twilight.
Mm.
But as a writer now, I look back and I'm like, oh, this character is she's so flat. She doesn't have any other interest or any other thing going for her in her life
Other
outside
than
of this,
romance.
obsession with Edward. Um, and I know that's part of the argument is she was so likable because she was so flat, because so many people could like relate to her, like so
Right.
many different readers could relate to this character.
Oh, that's interesting.
But yeah, no, I definitely, um, I don't know, I look at it differently now that I've been writing and developing characters myself. I just look at it differently, but it's still one of those fun things to sit back and watch when, you want to watch something mindless with your daughter.
Man, that's a really good point.
Anyway.
That's a really good point. And honestly, it was a great point to end on. Well, you already had your final thoughts. You might as well do it again. Age of the Almek. Pick it up. uh at Tara A. Lake for Instagram, Tara A. Lake for the website, Lake Publishing. Make sure to get everything
Yeah.
up there. It's been an absolute blast, an honor. Thank you again.
Thank you to the viewers. Thank you, whoever's listening. And thank you so much, Angel, for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is the end of the podcast, AR's Tales, aka the ART podcast. Check on us Monday. Peace out.